Welcome back. Welcome back. Somalia's fragile transitional government is appealing for international help in its efforts to bring peace to the world's most fractured nation. Somalia is being torn apart by civil war waged between government troops and Islamist insurgent groups, notably the Al-Shabab. The transitional government theoretically has a 2-year timetable to try to achieve free and fair elections. Yet much of the country is out of control by the government. No control of the government except near and around Mogadishu, that's all. More than 4,000 African Union troops are trying to defeat the insurgents, but the government wants more help, more soldiers, more money, and even then it might not survive as a nation. I'm joined now by Somalia's Treasury Minister, Abdirah Omar Osman. Mr. Osman, Abdi, let me quote some memorable words of yours last week when you summarized the situation in your country, in Somalia, this way. The challenge facing the current government remains enormous. Number one, as you know, is security. As you all know, the government only controls parts of Mogadishu, and most parts of the country is controlled by the opposition group Al-Shabab and Hezbollah Islam, which is, to put it mildly, a tough situation. I mean, it doesn't give you control of the country. I mean, are you confident you can change all that or not?
Thank you, David, and thank you for having me here. And it's a pleasure for me. And as you said, yes, the challenges are enormous. Nevertheless, we are the legitimate government in the country. And as you know, the peace process we're going on in Djibouti, which resulted for the opposition groups and then the transitional federal government come together. And now we have a transitional federal government which is led by Sheikh Ahmed. So since we have the legitimacy government for us to function, we are very hopeful and we're committed. And that's why our number one priority is security. And we need to bring peace and stability in the country.
Right. And it's one thing being a legitimate government, but it's another operating it, obviously. I mean, how much of the what, 8 or 10 million people in Somalia, how many are within your control? Just as you said, Mogadishu, really. How do you get control of the rest?
Mogadishu, as well as now, we have control of a region of border to the Ethiopian, and which is called Hiran, and also now Kismaiyo, which is being controlled Al-Shabab. And last night we had news where Al-Shabab were overthrown from there. So we are getting the support from the population in terms of other regions, but nevertheless, the tasks ahead is very huge.
And Al-Shabab, to what extent is that the same thing as Al-Qaeda? How linked are the two, Al-Shabab and Al-Qaeda?
Al-Shabab, the extremist groups in Somalia, and the way they started originally was Somali-led. But nevertheless, since Al-Qaeda was grown out from Afghanistan and other parts of the world, now we have clear evidence or links to Al-Qaeda, and they're not hiding away from that. They're publicly stating that their allegiance to Al-Qaeda. And recently, during the Eid celebration, when Al-Shabaab leaders spoke in public, and they made a video saying that we allegiance to Osama bin Laden. So it's evident. And not only that, as you know, in March, Osama bin Laden called for the overthrow of Sheikh Sharif's government, and he called for more jihadists in Somalia. Since then, we have seen an increase of extremists or foreign fighters in the country.
Yeah, and for instance, in terms of suicide bombers and all of that, and the increase in those and so on, how does that affect your life? I mean, are you in danger, really, at any point?
Of course, we face real challenges in Mogadishu, where on a daily basis we see suicide bombings and as well as roadside bombs. And you can imagine every time you travel from one place to another, you think what will happen next. So the threat is real, but nevertheless we believe that we are doing the right thing for the people, and we are there for the people, and we can only hope that we can eradicate these elements of extremists because there's no way, no religion will allow someone to commit a suicide bomb. And the recent one on the 17th of September, we had one of the suicide bombers were from US. So you can imagine the threat that we face, people coming from all over the place and trying to jihad. And these are young people. I think they have been either brainwashed or the way they were taught the religion is absolutely unacceptable. So Islam is a peace religion, and that's what we tend to do. We are Islamic State. Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, as you know, who was the chairman of the Islamic Courts Union in 2006, who brought peace and stability in the country. Now he's the head of the government. Yet these opposition groups still want to fight, still want to commit acts of suicide. So we say to them, the only way to get out of the morass of the current situation in Somalia is by talking peacefully on the table. And we've done lots of reconciliation among Somalis, and we will continue to do that.
I gather that the United States have started to supply weapons to you again.
Yes, they did, and we are very grateful for that. But nevertheless, the weapons that they provided is not sufficient for us to combat Al-Shabab. Al-Shabab, they are getting a lot of resources from outsiders, mainly from Eritrea and other countries who are supporting via Eritrea. And not only that, they're controlling in major parts of Somalia, and they're collecting revenues from there. So they are well funded, and they do have more weapons than from us. So we, Somali government, our forces do not have the right equipment, the right for us to combat. And this is one of the reasons that you see there's not much progress from the government side.
And what about money? I mean, you're in desperate need of some money, and no doubt that's one of the reasons you're here in London. Where do you hope to get money from to make Somalia whole again?
I think we hope from the international community, and what we say to them is in order for us to build the institutions that can bring peace and stability to the country, institutions that can uphold the rule of law, institutions that can bring transparency and what have you, and accountability. The only way to do that for us to have enough resources so we can build the institution. Once we build the institution and have a Somali government, it is for the benefit of the outside world, and we will have less extremists there, and the Somalis who's in the diaspora, either in the Europe or America, and we've seen a lot of them coming back and joining the jihadists, and that's not good for our country and for the outside world. So in order for Somalia not to become a safe haven for terrorists, we want the institutions to be built, and this is for the benefit of the international community, and we hope that they do understand the emergency and the dire need for our government to have the financial resources.
Because at the moment you're struggling hard, but at the moment, would you say you're losing the war, not winning it at the moment?
At the moment, we are very hopeful to win. Nevertheless, if the current situation continues, lack of financial resources, lack of capacity, then we worry about for us losing the war, as well as Al-Shabab becoming the future government of Somalia. And this is what we do not want to happen. It's not good for the international community, and it's not good for Somalis, and it's not good for the region.
Do you think it really is possible, perhaps within 3 or 4 years?
I'm very optimistic, and we can have a fair election. And I think what we need to understand is most of Somalis, civilians, do want that, and they support the government in order. But nevertheless, they face with opposition groups who have weapons, who are threatening them. Anyone who sides with the government, they kill them, and the situation cannot continue as it is.
Well, we thank you very much for being with us today. You must be staring at the greatest problems that there are anywhere in the world, really, and we thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Now, what happens to all that supermarket food after the sell-by date has expired? The answer might shock you. It gets thrown away, buried in landfill dumps, enough to feed the world's hungry 3 times over, maybe. In this new book, in fact called Waste, historian Tristram Stuart has followed the sorry tale, and he joins me now. Tristram, welcome. Very good to have you with us. How much is wasted? How much food is wasted every day of the year in the world?
Well, if you look at a country such as the United States, all the way up the supply chain, from households to supermarkets, restaurants, onto manufacturers and farms, about half of their food supply ends up being wasted. Around the world, it's about a third of the entire production of the earth.
A third and a half.
That's in rich countries, the situation is far, far worse. As you can imagine, there's a huge amount of surplus. So the United States has 190% of the nutritional requirements of its population just in its shops and restaurants. That's after waste on farms and manufacturers.
Yes, well, because I mean, what do you do, let's say, taking sandwiches with the sell-by date of next Wednesday, after that date, if it takes another week to get them to the hungry people of the world, they'd be perhaps non-hygienic and certainly not non-delicious.
Yes. Clearly that connection is spurious. The answer to our food waste problem is not to send our leftovers to Africa and Asia, but to avoid the surplus arising in the first place.
Right.
At the moment, supermarkets deliberately overstock their shelves to create an image of cornucopian abundance. Instead of selling off stock at reduced price, they will allow it to pass its sell-by date. The answer to the question is not allowing it to reach its expiry date in the first place. They can reduce price of stock, they can avoid overstocking, and at the very least, they can donate it to charities before it passes that expiry date. And there's no good reason why they shouldn't. In America, that practice is actually very widespread, 14 times more per capita in America than in the United Kingdom, for example. Most of the supermarkets are now donating a small amount of their surplus to charities, but that can be ramped up manyfold, and that can help people, local people who are suffering from hunger, and also reduce waste. But the argument in terms of the international impact is more about the food that we take off the world market. In a place like the United Kingdom, we grow food, we sell it on the world market, and we buy it. How much we buy is determined by how much we use and how much we waste. If we wasted less, we would buy less. That would leave the food on the world market for internationally traded commodities like wheat, and that would then be available for people in Africa and Asia who buy the food from exactly the same international market as us. So it's in the international market that we are literally taking food out of the mouths of the hungry.
What about in less mechanised parts of the world, less automated parts of the world, places without supermarkets?
Yes, well, there's a huge amount of waste that occurs on farms in developing world countries. So I did a lot of research, for example, in Pakistan, and their food is wasted completely unnecessarily, not because people are doing it deliberately or through negligence, but because they simply don't have the agricultural infrastructure to get the food from the farm to the market before it goes off. Some fruit and vegetable farmers lose 40% of their entire harvest because it goes off before it gets bought. We already know how to solve that problem. Things like grain stores, fruit crates so the fruit doesn't get bruised on its way along the road, refrigeration units, pasteurization, the kind of thing that Western countries take for granted. What we need to do in the rich world, if we want to increase the supply of food in the developing world, is to invest in that sort of post-harvest technology. It's very easy, it's very cost effective, and it's a much more environmentally friendly way of boosting production than what we're doing at present, which is to chop down the Amazon rainforest and other forests around the world to grow more food.
Well, thank you very much for that. In the course of what you were saying there seemed to be some such urgent, and the really important thing is simple solutions to some of these problems. I mean, that's what's the real revelation. Thank you very much, Tristram.
Thank you.
A million thanks. We'll take a break and then we'll come back with one of the most fascinating film directors in the world, Werner Herzog.